Life in student ministry. Conversation among youth workers.
He is going to be talking about the topic, how do we leverage online and social media for discipleship and evangelism in student ministry. And again, as they're talking, if you've got a couple of things that he says that kind of turns a light bulb on inside of you, write that down so that in the discussion times, you can be ready to jump in there and discuss, and the Lord can speak to you in that. We're excited, Tim. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
Sure.
Take it away.
Okay. I think I need a mic.
Okay.
Hear me? All right. Hey guys, it's been fun hanging out with you guys for the past couple, hours. Had like yesterday and today. We've had a fun time, a lot of good discussion and conversation happening. I'm going to be honest with you. John and Matt asked me to talk on this subject of how do we leverage online social media for discipleship and evangelism and student ministry. And specifically, we know that in 10 years from now, it's all going to be different. And what's going to be happening in the future with online media and with youth ministry, and how's that going to influence what we're doing and all that kind of stuff. And I looked at that question and I just thought, I have no idea. I don't know what's going to happen. So what I did is I pitched John and Matt. I just said well, here's a couple other things that maybe we could talk about. Some other things I feel like maybe I could share something that would be a little more, I could speak a little more authoritatively on. And John's like, nope, talk about it. I was like, okay. So I've been mulling over this. I've been thinking about it and been processing for the past couple of weeks. How do we leverage online social media for discipleship and evangelism and student ministry? And something about that question just didn't quite seem right to me, and I wasn't really sure what it was. I was thinking, I was like, what is it about this question that really just, there's just doesn't seem to fit right with my framework of how I think about social media and stuff. And I think there's a couple things. One, the question is really hard to answer because 10 years from now, does anybody have any idea what social media is going to look like 10 years from now? I mean, we can look in the past and we see that Facebook is only 8 years old total, but only 7 years old as a social media platform, right? And then YouTube, that's founded in 2005, that's only 6 years old. Twitter is also only 6 years old. And I was like, what, is there even a social media platform out there that we could consider, this is 10 years old? And the only one I found is the wealth of knowledge that is found in Wikipedia. That's 11 years old. So social media is so new that to project 10 years out is really, really difficult, especially to try to figure out how can we leverage this today and ways that influence us 10 years from now, and what's going to be happening 10 years from now that we can start planning for and projecting for today. It just seems really, really difficult, especially how we're going to do this with evangelism and discipleship. Also, I was thinking, there's this assumption wrapped up in this question that for some reason we either have to or we should be using social media to in evangelism and discipleship with our kids. And I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the hype surrounding these technological tools that we start asking questions like, how can I use this in ministry? Parenthetically, I think that's an okay question, but as I've been wrestling through a lot of ministry issues and stuff myself, I am learning more and more that it's really important to ask good questions and the right questions. And I remember hearing that from several other people when I was younger, just starting in ministry. People were like, oh, you have to ask good questions. And I was like, what does that mean? The question, you don't get to pick the question. The question is the question. It is what it is. And the answer is what we're trying to find. What is that? And it just seemed like something that people said that sounds smart to me. But I'm learning more and more that they're totally right, in that in order to get the answers we want, we have to ask the good questions. So I don't think there's anything wrong with asking, how do we use this in ministry? I do think it's kind of a trivial one. Does anybody know what the word technology even means? Literally what the word means, technology? Okay, the word literally just means tool. That's all it means, just tool. And the thing about a tool is that a tool has a specific use that we use it for, right? So it's meant to meet a specific need. You wouldn't use a hammer to go rake your yard, right? Because the tool is not intended to meet that need or that purpose. Likewise, you wouldn't take a rake up to your roof and try to put on a new roof and nail in shingles with a rake, right? because those tools are meant for something else. They're meant for a specific purpose. What if you had a hammer that was so cool and all your kids were using that hammer and everyone was using that hammer, and it was just like the newest, the hottest, the latest, the hippest hammer out there, and you're like, man, I wish I had a way I could use this hammer, in ministry or with something. But it doesn't really matter if it's not meeting the need of your ministry that you're trying to meet by using it. It doesn't matter how cool it is, how hip it is. If everyone's using it, you use the tool because it's what your ministry needs. When it comes to youth ministry, there is no need, and this is an analogy I like to try to think of, there's no analogy to try to force that square peg into that round hole if it doesn't naturally fit there. Around that square peg of technology is not something we need to force into our ministry. It's something we use as a tool to accomplish something that's supposed to naturally fit. A couple examples of how I think we do this in youth ministry. For example, like with teaching, okay? We say, we're going to use technology in our teaching, so we are going to use like a video clip to illustrate something or make a point or something like that. I've seen too many times when a youth worker or a pastor, a presenter, whoever is doing a really good job, and they just they plug that, whatever they really want to drive home, that point, they plug it home, and it's right there. And I'm feeling like, let's just let this sink. Let's just kind of let this mull over this. Let's just kind of see, let's let this really sink into our heads, and let's think about this. But then instead they show up a video clip, and it kind of the whole point just dissipates, because even though it's related, it's so many people think, I have to use a video clip to keep people engaged, so they throw out the video clip and really just distracts from the very message they were just trying to drive home. Maybe there needs to be some more space, or maybe you need to wait later to use a video clip, or don't use a video clip at all. Another big one is when it comes to using PowerPoint, is people just put words up on a screen, and most of the time I see with PowerPoint is they just put the words up on the screen, the exact same words that they're saying, right? And so it's especially if we're gonna be reading a Bible passage, we'll put the scripture verse right up there so we can read it together. Or if I have a couple points, I'll put my main points right up there on the screen so that people can read, and if they're taking notes, or they can just write it down. And the problem with that, there's been a lot of research done on this. The University of New South Wales in 2007 determined that it's actually detrimental to put the exact words up on the screen that you're saying. So not only does it make me feel like you're just insulting my intelligence, I couldn't read that, but it's actually the human brain likes to process things according to this research. They can digest it even as verbal form or as a written form, but when you put the two together and use the same, try to put verbal and written together at the same time, the memory retention of what's up there on the screen was actually said that decreases. So the point is this: using technology is fine, but we have to learn how to use technology well in ministry as a tool in our own personal lives, and then that way, when the need arises, when that tool is going to help us meet a need in our ministry, we have that tool in our tool belt all ready to take it out and use it because we know how to use that tool and how it's going to meet need in our ministry. A couple of years ago, you guys remember Google Wave? Anybody ever use Google Wave? Raise your hand if you know what Google Wave is. Okay, so briefly, Google Wave was Google said a couple years ago, we're gonna, email's so old school, and it does have some problems, limitations. Email was created so long ago that we're gonna come up with a new system, or we call it Google Wave, that will replace email. And it had a lot of good things going for it. Specifically, related to what I'm gonna share is, it's almost like writing to each other in real time. I could see, Josiah writing something, and then I could right below him if you want, instead of doing a reply to all, where then everyone's got to write their lines in different colors so whose is whose, and then you copy in someone else, and then the email gets fragmented and all that kind of stuff. They're we're going to solve this problem. So I started using it myself, and I thought it was a great tool. Google's shutting it down in January just because it didn't really get adopted that widely for other reasons, but it was a great tool. And I remember seeing many blog posts of people saying, how are we going to use Google Wave in ministry? And there's youth pastors saying, I'm going to get all my youth leaders on Google Wave, and we're going to stop using email to communicate. We're going to start using Google Wave instead because it's got all these cool features and stuff, and it'll make life so much easier. And again, that question I think is okay, but what I did, my personal approach was, I'm just going to learn how to use this personally, and if a need arises in my ministry that it'll help meet, then I'll use it. And that happened. That we were doing a series with our high school kids on marriage, and we wanted to do this thing where we send the girls in one room with the girl leaders and the guys in another room, and we wanted them to be able to ask questions of each other anonymously, but in real time without like a messenger boy going back and forth, like writing down pieces of paper or something. So we used Google Wave. Here's a screenshot of what it looked like with the girls' questions to the guys. And I wish you could see this whole thing because it was just amazing. You know, the girls would, that's my wife, Dana, she's in one room with her computer. She said, explain why the guys are so visual. And then I would ask the guys that question, and they were all sitting around my computer, and we would answer it together, and then we would just go back and forth. And while I'm answering the number one, they're down here asking another one, and then we're asking a question while they're answering another one. It was just kind of like this really awesome thing. Here's the screenshot of what it looked like from the guys asking the girls questions. And again, I wish you could see this whole thing. It was just awesome. But what I did is I didn't say start with technology and try to fit it into my ministry. I started with the needs of my ministry, and then I said, how am I going to use social media to meet the needs of my ministry, and went the other way around to it. So to answer the question, how do we use this in ministry? I say, if it doesn't naturally solve a problem in your ministry, don't force it. It's okay to use it on your own, so you're familiar with the tool, that when the time comes for you to need it, you can just pull it out of your tool belt and use it, but use it on your own first. I think some of my original struggle with this question too at the beginning is that I felt like there was an assumption that I needed to be practical and give you some how-tos and stuff. A couple years ago, I did a thing called the online mission trip, and just real briefly what it was is I figured, hey, we don't need to go on a boat or a plane to go somewhere. We can just reach the other side of the world with the internet now. And so I was growing increasingly discontent with some of the things I was seeing happening and what we were doing with outreach events and things. So I was like, no more outreach events. We're going to do what I call outreach campaigns instead. And I pushed my kids for a 2-week period of time that we set the date. We're going on a mission trip, but we're going on a mission trip to Facebook, where we're going to share Christ with our friends and other people. And make a long story short, I posted about it on my blog, and before I know it, at the end, for my estimate, there's about 3,000 kids all over the world joined us in that 2 weeks. Every continent was represented except for Antarctica. So this became this really global thing, and it was awesome. And what we started doing, we would use Facebook to post status updates about what God is doing in our life. What is God challenging me with? What am I learning? What am I growing with? What am I struggling with? We would send a private message to a friend and just say, hey, I just want you to know that I'm praying for you today. Is there anything specific you'd like me to pray about? And this could be an unbeliever, a friend who doesn't know Christ, and they could be like, what? It's kind of weird, but okay. And it just sparking spiritual conversations with our friends online. One of the coolest things I saw happen was there was a couple kids who were really good for photography, and they went out and they shot a whole photo album just for Facebook that shared the gospel from one picture to the rest. They tagged a couple of their unsaved friends in it, and they just asked their friends hey, what do you think about these pictures, or what, just asking them different questions and engaging with their friends in dialogue on Facebook underneath this photo album. Other kids, they would just write a note about sharing their faith story on Facebook, put that out there, maybe tag a couple unsaved friends, talk with them. Some of them just did it on video. So a lot of this really cool stuff was going on Facebook, really practical. How do we use Facebook to start sharing our faith? The thing I think that all these things have in common, the status updates and the sharing our faith stories and photo album and private messages and all that stuff, what they have in common, or I hope that they have in common, is that all these, I hope, become natural expressions of these kids' lives and their hearts. That their faith, no matter where they are, if they're in social media 10 years from now, or if they're in social media today, or if they're in the workforce, or if they're at school, or if they're in the athletic field, or the orchestra, or wherever they are, that their faith is just oozing out of them. And when it comes to how do we influence and use social media for discipleship and evangelism, I think that is how we do it. It's by helping kids see that their faith doesn't just stay right in their church youth group room. And I know we all agree to that. We all say, yeah, that's what we want. But somehow that hasn't translated yet, right? So kids are still very much compartmentalizing. And part of that, and this is generic, I'm speaking to a group of people, not individuals. on a larger level, I think that one of the things I wish I saw happening more was that youth leaders were actually modeling this kind of thing for the kids. So do our kids see us using Facebook to share Christ with our friends? Do they see our status updates of what God is doing in our life? Do they see us posting on their friends like, hey, maybe a kid in youth group is just had a really bad test today or something like that, and you post, hey, just want to let you know that I think you're awesome and I'm praying for you. Like, do our other kids see us modeling this for them of what it means to use social media to integrate our faith into all our relationships, even online? I try to make it a point for myself to never ask my kids to do something I'm not first doing myself. So if that means in something like this, am I first using social media to engage with my unsaved friends? If I'm going to talk about evangelism at youth group, in my first couple of weeks before them, like everything I'm going to talk about then, am I putting that in practice in my own life? And I think that's critical, because what happens is that when we teach it, it flows from our life and out of our heart and out of our experiences instead of flowing from our notes on a piece of paper, right? And I think that invisible quality is something that kids can really see, that passion is contagious, and I think that's the part that sometimes is missing. Not all the time, but I think that's one thing that we really need to be intentional about, is practicing this ourselves. It shows kids that, hey, I'm serious about this, that I'm in this with you, that you're not doing it alone, and that most importantly, I actually expect that this is going to be lived out in your life because I'm living it out in my life first. And so when we teach, we have personal stories to share rather than, whatever's in the latest illustration book or something that we pick up. Let me give you a different perspective of this question. How do we leverage online social media for discipleship and evangelism and student ministry? I think the answer to that question for how we influence the future of social media is the same way we leverage everything else in the future for our kids. We train them and we push them to go deep into God's Word, right? Like what John was talking about yesterday. Go deep into God's Word and passionately take that Word wide, go deep and wide with both at the same time, to the people around them. And that includes their influences in social media and their online spaces. When they grow older and they continue to engage in social media in 10 years from now, that means they're still, their faith is just oozing out of them into those places. Their personal interaction, their workplace, and especially their families are influenced. So if we're going to influence social media, I think we do it by influencing the kids now that God has entrusted to us, and then seeing that take place down in the future. So influencing students who will be using social media is the best way to leverage social media for the kingdom. So I don't think I really answered the question, though. And I think what a lot of us read this question and we think, okay, Tim, that's all great and fine and all, but how do I personally use social media today? How do I use it in my own youth group for evangelism and discipleship? I know we got to teach kids so that it's like in all areas of life, but how do I use it? And I would just say if that's just a question that you're struggling with, then maybe you're trying to put that square peg into the round hole. Maybe there are some other tools you could use that would be more effective, more influential, and work naturally for you in that sphere, and where you and your kids are at, than trying to how do I use social media to influence my kids in discipleship and evangelism? Maybe that's a square peg in a round hole. Maybe it's like you're trying to rake your yard with a hammer. It's just not working, okay? Or maybe not. Maybe social media really is the best tool we can use for discipleship and evangelism, and we just don't know how to use the tool effectively yet or properly yet, right? So maybe we're not familiar with it enough. We're not using it. Maybe we've got the right hammer, but we're holding it at the wrong end, And so we need to learn how to use our tool better so that we can be effective in evangelism and discipleship online. So that is what you guys are going to discuss. I'm not going to provide any answers there. I have a couple questions that you guys can use and go through if you'd like, and discuss this more at your tables about leveraging social media for discipleship and evangelism. These are the starting points, and you can go from there, from however your table leads. So hopefully that's helpful in some way.
Thanks for watching this video from Life in Student Ministry. Find us online at studentministry.org and facebook.com/studentministry.